Hey miners, Mining King here. Today we're going to be taking apart a EVGA 3080 Ti XC3 and doing thermal paste and thermal pads. So let's get right into it. Okay guys, so we have the card here. This is an EVGA 3080 Ti. Now I have 6 GPUs that were sent to me from Hawk, varying from 3080 Ti's to 3090s that need some pad replacements. So I'm going to be doing some videos on some teardown videos here, so that like you guys can learn how to like tear apart these GPUs on your own. Now I will say that doing 3080 Ti's and 3090s right off the bat as your first GPUs to take apart and learn on, I do not recommend this. I recommend like using like Polaris cards like 570s, 580s, or 480s, 10 series. Founders cards are some of the hardest cards to work on because there's so many extra screws. The AIB cards, which are like the partner cards like EVGA, are much easier to work on. So just to give you guys a little bit of a warning. So I do have a founders card in this rotation. It's a 3090 that I'll have to do, but we're going to start with the EVGA, which is the card that Hawk had actually, I believe, repadded and repasted in a live stream, and he had some, I believe, some temperature issues here on the core. So what I need to do is I need to plug this in one of my rigs. So I took all the cards out of my rig because these things draw so much power. So this is going to be the only card on one of the rigs, and I want to do an initial test of heat on the core as on the memory. So we're going to plug it in, we're going to let it mine for a little bit, get some basic temperature readings, and then that way we have kind of a base point of what we can work with here. So just give me a few moments, let me get this in the test bench, and then I'll bring the screen over to let you guys actually see what the card, the temperatures are on the card. So that way we can see if we can maybe help them out a little bit. All right, guys, so we're over here in Mojave OS, and we just started the miner. And the core temperature does look to be pretty high. It's in the 60s, and it literally just started like a minute ago. We're going to sit here. I'm going to watch it for about 30 minutes. I really want to let it see what kind of temperatures that eventually set in. And if we really start getting to that close to that, 70 mark, then we definitely know that we have some kind of a thermal pad issue, maybe a thickness issue, or I'll have to see if it's the paste he used, or I'll just have to wait and see and crack it open. So hopefully though, and I'm not really versed in tuning 3080 Ti's, so I'm just seeing, what the core does. Now we're at 90 Celsius on the memory, which is not bad, right? 105 is the thermal throttle point, so keep that in mind. So we're still underneath the threshold. This is a little troublesome, right? I'm not sure what the original temperature was because Hawk has already attempted to repad this, so I don't have like original data. So this is where the core is right now at 96C, but this is the part that I'm really concerned about. So thermal throttling occurs at about 105C, so we're about 10C under that. So I mean, the GDDR6X does run extremely more hot than the regular GDDR6, but this is what's troubling me. We are running Ethereum, and his core is at 70 Celsius, so I'm thinking either there's an issue with thermal paste or there's an issue with pads making contact, something like that. So we need to get the card apart, tear it apart. Now the only issue I do have with this card is like I said, he already repadded it, so I can't take measurements because don't know if those measurements are correct. Now I may choose to step down his pads, like maybe he's using 2.5, maybe I might try to use 2.25, right, to get a better contact with the cooler. So we'll have to wait and see until I get it apart and kind of figure out what's going on. All right, guys, so we got the card back here, and I'm going to try to get this on camera, right, because I do remember this card now, because I think I was watching him live do this. So this card is he did with the critical pads, right? And I could tell because they are. You see how they're green like that? Those are the critical pads. So I believe that this was a custom kit, right? They have all the sizes and everything's cut to perfection, right? And it's all pre like measured and stuff like that. Now the issue I do have with some pre-cut kits, right, is going to be this. Sometimes manufacturers do make revisions sometime down the road. That's why sometimes they say if you have a newer model or a later model, right, you need to do this or have this size, because sometimes revisions are made. So maybe at some point there was a revision made and Critical doesn't know about it. And so maybe sometimes they don't work, right, because they don't have the correct sizes. Now, it could be that maybe the person who gives them information, EVGA, hasn't told them yet, or all right, I have no idea. But I believe that this is going to be a too thick of thermal pad on here. But I will consider maybe sometimes some pads are like really tough, right? And you need to like kind of squish it down. So sometimes you can put your GPU here, not pressing too hard, right? But give some firm force to kind of make those pads sit down. Now he did send me a bunch of the GPU risers pads, so those are the pads I'll be using. But first we need to crack open this. Let me take a look at the core. Now the reason that I use my X method, right, or you could use like a dot or whatever you want to use, right, besides the spatula, and spread it everywhere, because the issue with the spread everywhere is when you use a dot or an X, you could see the imprint that it leaves, right, when it makes contact. So if there isn't good contact, you'll be able to tell and see, when you tear this thing apart, if you like don't make it all messy. You know what I mean? If you just kind of move it everywhere, then it doesn't work. But if you're careful when you take them apart, you can pretty much tell if the X worked. So let's get this guy apart and let's look into why maybe Hawk is having some heat issues. So we've seen that it was 69C on the core. That's terrible, because I mean, we're not even doing Kapow at that point. We're doing Ethereum. So we definitely have to work on the core temperatures. I'd like to see the memory temperatures come down more. So let's get this taken apart and let's check into what issues he's having and see if we can't fix it for him. All right, guys. So to disassemble this backplate, there's a screw here that goes through this hole. And then on the opposite side, there's going to be a bolt right here where my finger is, right? There is a bolt right here. Okay, I already took it out. Okay, there's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, just to get the back plate off. You will need some kind of a nut driver to get the bolt on and off, so just be aware of that. It's a very small bolt. I could try to show you on camera here, but it's really, really small. Okay. We also took off our clamp. Sometimes these can be spring loaded, so you kind of want to take them off evenly, not just like let it just kink up, and it could damage things. So I am just going to set this off to the side and keep all the screws on the clamp, since they're just hanging out there anyways. Now, when you're disassembling a card, right, and you're at this point where the card can come apart essentially, okay, you need to locate. So these are the lights and the fans over here, right? Or these could all just be all the fans, because there's 3 fans here, right? So I'll look around on this side. So that's probably all the fans, okay? Because there's also one right here. I'm going to suspect that this is probably for some kind of RGB, because I think RGB is right here on this EVGA symbol. So when you take these apart, you can't just rip them apart, right? So you got to be careful about the cables. Now, when you're working on the cables, okay, you could try to get them out right now, but I'm going to tell you this. Do not pull on the wires. do not force it out. Take your time, rock it back and forth on the connector, okay? Because you could ruin it and make it so it doesn't work at all. So just take your time with this. If you have to come back in a little bit and try it again, that's fine. Sometimes these connectors can be very stubborn or difficult, okay? Just if it's being difficult, man, just walk away and come back, right? Because it's not worth it breaking a card. So just take your time with the connectors. Make sure you look at them. Maybe you have to push down and then pull them out. When you're trying to get a card apart, you kind of want to wiggle it back and forth. Obviously, this one's going to be a little bit easier because he recently repatted and repaced this. But if you've been mining on it for a while and it's like kind of feels like it's stuck, you take the PCB and the cooler, and then you want to just kind of work it back and forth and wiggle it a little bit, right? It should kind of break it up a little bit, so that way wiggling it. I was just wiggling it just back and forth like this. See how it's wiggling? That's how you want to do it. And there, it's separated, right? So I'm not going to clean this card per se, because these cards are really clean, and he recently just did the cleaning himself, so it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense for me to clean them. So what I essentially want to do is I just need the card like this apart, just so that I can work, right? Just so we could see maybe what happened here. So now that we have the card taken apart, I could definitely tell that Hawk used a little too much thermal paste, but this, I think, was the second card. As well as, it does look like there wasn't good contact in some points. So, but as you can see here, if I can't I'll try to get this closer to the camera so you guys can see it. So you can see that there is a couple bare spots, right, on the die. Now, there's a couple things that could happen when you have bare spots, right? And so I could see here, a little right here, quite a bit right here. What will happen in some of these spots that actually show up is, where you could actually see the die, is they'll create hot spots, right? And that'll give you not very consistent temperatures, right? I'm going to measure these. I might go a touch smaller because I feel a lip here, right? I feel a lip, and that's even with it compressed, right? I could feel this lip here, which there's no lip on this cooler, right? So I might want to, if it's like a 2.5 reading, I'll probably do 2.25, which we could see if he has that in here. We have 3.75, 2.5. See, here you go. 2.25. Okay, so we have everything, at least the core and the heatsink, cleaned off. So now what we need to do is we need to actually start measuring some of these pads and cutting them. So, like I said before, it doesn't need to be perfect. So my choice of weapon for doing this is going to be just a box knife. So we need to get our digital caliber first before we start cutting, just to make sure we have the correct sizes. So this is a digital caliber. You need to zero it out before you use it. So you just see this 0, 0. So what we need to do now is we're going to take one of these off. I'm going to do the chips first because they should be all the same size. So we're going to take one off. These are pretty tough, I would say, and you don't want to clamp it down. Like, you don't need to squish the thermal pad till it stops reading. So you don't want to squish it and like cut into it. You just want to barely have both ends touching to get an accurate reading. And I can almost wiggle it a little out a little bit, right? So you don't want to squish it. So if you squish it down, you're going to get an inaccurate read. So I have a diagram up here for you guys so you guys can see kind of what I'm doing. But I am going to go over everything, and we'll start from the front of the card by the PCIe power and work our way back. So the first one here, which is the small strip, right, closest to the PCIe, power connectors, is going to be a 2.5 millimeter. Okay, that's your first size. Just a real small strip, so really easy. The next size is actually going to be a 1 millimeter. Okay, so 1 mil, and you can see it's just right on the other side of the 2.5, and it's also the same thing on the other side of the card. It's on the other side of the strip over there by the 2.75. So Hawk did not have 2.75, so I actually had to stack them. Okay, which is perfectly fine for where that is. So I stacked those. So that's 2.75 mils on the close to the rear IO, where like your display port and everything is like that. And then for the main GDDR6X memory chips, we went with 2.25. So those are going to be your pad sizes if you have this 3080 Ti xc3 from EVGA. Now, I will disclose again that if you have GDDR6X, and what will happen is these pads are designed to take more heat off the chips, right? So let's say they came from the factory with 10, right? And what's going to happen is essentially you are pulling more heat from the chips, which is going to be dispersed into the heatsink, which the heatsink is going to get extremely more hot, which that heat is going to spread out onto the, where the core is. So you will see a significant core increase while doing these thermal pads. So keep that in mind, that you will see a core jump when you are doing pads like this. So just keep that in mind, guys. So let's get back to the video. Finish down the teardown. Definitely feel like this will be better. I think it will make good contact, and I think the memory should do a lot better. So okay, guys, we have successfully repadded the card. Let me get some thermal paste on this guy, and let's get it back in the rig, man, and see if it worked. All right, she's reassembled enough to go back in there. We don't need to put the back plate on because it doesn't offer any cooling. So this is perfectly good enough just to get it back in the rig and get it hatching again. So let me turn on the miner and let's see what it does. All right, guys, so we're back and I have it in the test bench right now. And we have dropped quite a few C from the initial starting point. So before Hawk even repadded this card was thermal throttling at 110 C, and it is now down to 92 C on the memory. I've had this going for almost an entire 24 hours. It's almost an entire day. And so this has come down from 96 to down to 94 because we switched from critical pads to the GPU riser pads. And then the card was running at about 60 C on the stock stuff, and when Hawk repadded it, it got up to 69, 70 C, right? Well, the reason, like I've already said before, is you're putting more heat into the heatsink from the memory, so it's going to make your core get hotter. But we did bring down his core temperature by 5C. So I do believe that this is a win. So we've gone down another 5C on the core and another 4C on the memory. So I think this is pretty successful. Just kind of keep in mind, I know people really like to repad their 3080s and 3080 Ti's, 3070 Ti's, 3090s, anything with the GDDR6X. Just know that your core will get hotter. So if your core is like at 58 right now, it could get all the way up to like 64-ish, maybe, because the heat that you're going to be dispersing from your memory into your heatsink, right? Because that's essentially what you're doing. You're absorbing more heat is going to be offset onto your core. So keep that in mind. Well, guys, let me know how you guys like this video. The padding was successful. I'm pretty happy with the results. Okay, guys, this is the Mighty King giving you the most hashes, and I'll see you next time.